Hello, and welcome to the Bitcoin.Review podcast. This is an ad-free pod. Thank you so much for streaming those sats. If you're a new listener, I'm NVK, and I run Coinkite, where we've been helping people secure their Bitcoins for over a decade. We make products like the Coldcard, the Block Lock, and we have a bunch of other projects. You can find more information on Coinkite.com. Today, we have some awesome guests to read the list. So, hello, Lyn.
Hey, happy to be here. I might have the distinction of being like the least qualified person ever on your show.
That is just perfect. Craig Raw.
Hey, MVK, good to be here again.
And Ben Carman.
Hey, guys. Good to be back on again.
So for the people that don't know, Craig is the lead maintainer of Sparrow Wallet. And Ben Carman is part of the Bitcoin company and Mutiny Wallet now, doing all kinds of cool, awesome stuff. And Lyn, if you don't know, she does have a thing or two to say about economics. I think you won't need too much introductions. So I wanted to give a shout out to a few events at the Bitcoin Park in Nashville. They're going to have an open house on Wednesday, March 15th. Then there is the Product and Design Summit on April 12th. And the Power of Lightning Summit on July 13th. The guys from Bitcoin Park are killing it. Thanks, Adele and Rod, for the work you do. Another fun note on events is instead of me blabbing about most of the events, we have now a nice URL, bitcoinevents.org, without the HTTPS, because it's just a redirect where we now have a Bitcoin events page on bitcoin.review that is maintained by yours truly, Johnny, where we try to keep a lot of Bitcoin events up to date. And you can search, you can sort. I figured it was a much needed thing. So check that out. So guys, let's get started with the list. So I added Sparrow as the first since we have Craig here. Craig, do you want to give us a brief summary of the reviews and highlights of 172 and 173?
Sure, I'll do my best. So I think, 172, there was a bit of a gap between 171 and 172, and the major features that were introduced in 172 are really about, actually somewhat hidden. It's really about upgrading the internal engine that Sparrow uses when it talks directly to Bitcoin Core. So this is not when you're using an Electrum server, but when you're directly connecting to Bitcoin Core. And the upgrade there is that it uses Bitcoin Core's relatively new descriptor wallets, which is the sort of more modern way of doing things on Bitcoin Core right now with regard to wallets. So that was quite a lot of work building that in, but it really sets up Sparrow for the future in terms of where Bitcoin Core is going. Not that I expect the Core's legacy wallets to disappear anytime soon, but it's going to
never go away.
Yeah, but it still sets them up. And I think if you're using Core, you have to, with those legacy wallets, you have to compile this ancient version of Berkeley DB, and it's just really not ideal. So it kind of makes life a little bit easier for us all. So that was one of the big ones. Beyond that, there's always an issue around passphrases. So it's an ongoing thing of me trying to improve Sparrow so people don't fall over their own feet when it comes to a passphrase. As some people know, if you enter a passphrase, any passphrase creates a valid seed, which means that any passphrase you enter in Sparrow will create a valid wallet. And that means that people don't often understand when they have entered a passphrase and introduce a typo that they get a valid wallet. So quite a lot of work in the last few months going into that, just trying to make sure, number one, that when you enter the passphrase, it shows you the master fingerprint and a little visual cue, which we call a life hash, which is a unique little image.
Are you using the XFP for that?
Yes, I am. Yeah, it's just a direct use of those bytes. Correct.
Perfect.
So you can see as you type this thing into the password field, sort of a passphrase field, which looks like a password field, you can see and you can just do a visual check like, yes, I've got my passphrase right. And then just, in 173, which just came out earlier today, again, this actually now goes further that when you create a wallet, it actually, when you have to kind of confirm that you even want to use a passphrase and read a little blurb to explain what I just explained around every passphrase creates a valid wallet. So really just trying to reduce the user support around the passphrase use because it is a thing. And I know that other wallets have tried different things. Some make the wallet password the same as the wallet passphrase, which is a clever trick, but, obviously limits what you can do with it. And some, I believe, just allow you to kind of hard code it, kind of just make sure that it's kind of written into the seed. So it's not something you have to enter every time. So yeah, there's a few different ways to do it, but I hopefully have reached a level where it's going to be a bit easier now. Beyond that, we've got BIP 329, which is wallet labels. And that's really about having a standard to import and export labels from a wallet. You can easily transfer your funds with a seed, but you can't take your labels until this BIP arrived. And I'm hoping that
that's your own BIP, right?
That's right. Yeah. So, started with that last year, and it took about 6 months to get that approved as a BIP. But it seems to have now gone through and be relatively uncontroversial. So hopefully we're going to see it implemented in other wallets, and then you can switch to different wallets and take labels along with you, which is, I think, an important thing for us, so that we don't feel locked into any particular application. Then, of course, we have the Tap Signer, which came in as a supported hardware wallet on Sparrow as of 1772. And I've been pleasantly surprised by the number of people who have purchased a desktop card reader and are using it. So well done to you, NBK.
I was very surprised that, like the NFC stuff was sort of like the go is for phones, right? Phone first people. And I was actually surprised at how many people want the card readers and do NFC on the actual desktop. There is one laptop from HP, I think, that does have NFC on the near the keyboard. But yeah, that was surprising to me too.
Yeah. It's I think people just like the form factor of a card. It kind of makes sense. It's really a financial. It's sort of they see it as something which is familiar, and I think that helps a lot. And then, of course, we have the SATS card as well. There's also support for that. So, it's also a very handy device to be able to just load some funds on, perhaps give it to someone as a gift or as a trade. I think it's a nice way to be able to use Bitcoin in a very fungible manner.
People are sticking their ordinals.
Yeah. We could talk for some time about that, I'm sure. But on with the list, we've then got upgrades now to HWI 2.2.1, which just fixes a variety of different things, particularly around the ledger. I believe that there's new ledger firmware, by the way, coming out today, which if you want to use Taproot, you should get your hands on. But there's just a variety of fixes there, also for unchained wallets, which use a very old derivation path for P2SH wallets. So it's helpful there to just be able to sign with those. And then there's just a variety of other things. You've got in 173 now the ability to configure an external block explorer to view any kind of transaction that you have. So you can construct your transaction, sign it, broadcast, and immediately click to see it on mempool.space. Hopefully you run your own instance, but you can obviously configure whatever you want there. And what else do we have here? A variety of other smaller things, but I think that's the sort of major changes that have come in over the last two versions.
Very cool. Sparrow is, one of the best desktop wallets, and people are really using it. Thank you for maintaining this.
Sure.
I love software that is one man show. The best software is written by very few people.
Yeah, that's true. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. And, it's if you're in a large team, there's an ability to, think that it's someone else's job. But if there's a small team, you kind of take the responsibility on, and it's your job. So,
well, it's also easy to lose sort of like focus and lose the sort of like your main goal, because like more people have opinions, and software, in my view, should be opinionated, except for protocols.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. I guess now my turn here. Mark IV version 5.1. It's been a while since we had an update. We've been trying to be more conservative and not have a lot of updates. Why? Because, people are not getting robbed. So why open the doors? So Coldcard Mark IV version 5.1.0. New feature is microSD card as a second factor authentication. I really wanted this. Essentially, you can use a microSD card to be part of your login process into a Coldcard. So you have a special microSD card that you can hide somewhere else. And if you don't have it, Coldcard can wipe the seed. It could brick the device. So that if you don't want to remember trick pins or duress pins, you can just have this extra little card. It's very hard for an attacker to understand that that's going on. So also for the tap signer, now we can import the tap signer encrypted backup as the main seed or ephemeral seed. So if you need to recover, you have like a nice little way to do that you don't need a computer to do it. And also you can do tap signer via PSBT. Detached signatures, that was another big one. So I've encountered folks who are managing like large amounts of funds and people are now very concerned about their daily drivers or also even any computer really. And when you export an address list to double check to make big transactions, one concern was what if the computer is altering those addresses through malware or something, right? So what we're doing now is we're signing all the exports from Coldcard with your private key. So it's a Bitcoin message signed, right? And this is a nice little sort of like complete cycle of the file usage. It's kind of a big deal.
Do you sign with every address?
No, we signed the whole message, right?
Okay.
So your address list signed, right? And it's a detached signature, right? So you have a separate signature file, and you can use this website that we just launched called checkmsg.com. Is that right? Is it .com or .org? Checkmsg.org. The cool thing is that one is sort of like uses open libraries and stuff, but you can check it on your computer, so you don't have to be a shadowy supercoder to be able to check messages, right? So, and you're just checking the signature, so you don't have to dox your message. What else? Coldcard can now verify signed files. So yeah, so we do the opposite as well. So you can verify the signature in the Coldcard when the files are coming in. That's pretty cool too, because you don't have to trust what you're importing. Import enhancement. So now you can import multi-sig wallet via virtual disk. You can do that via NFC. What else here? That's export enhancements. So Samurai post and premix descriptors.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, so I know there is a lot of folks that like to use Sparrow with Coldcard for their mixing. So you can import and export that now. We added Lily Wallet. We've sort of like overhauled all the import and exports. That was sort of like a nice little gardening operation there. Backupping it. Oh yeah, so the backups are kind of better now. So people want to do more than one microSD backup with the same password. We save that password for the next backup as well, unless you want to not do that, so that you don't have to write the password multiple times because it's 12-word password. We added some extra security checks against people being dumb and lazy. So if you're throwing dice now, we prevent you from doing like ultra low entropy stuff. So for example, press 0 99 times and have poor entropy. But there's limits to what we could do there. And then, a few bug fixes. We added dice rolls code to duplicate rolls for 12 seed words. And then we had to release 5.1.1 because there was a little bug on the update code. So that's it on that. Lyn, do you use hardware wallets?
I do, yes.
Awesome. Ben, I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, big fan. I have a unopened MK4 somewhere on my desk, but
All right, guys. Nunchuk version 1.9.21 and 0.26 on Android. Added buffer period for inheritance claiming. So this is for their collaborative multi-sig services. They're adding more options there on how many days to trigger things. Okay, so also this is another nice one. So they have a density slider for QR codes, so that you can have a QR code with less density, so it's easier to read. Enable autofocus when scanning QR codes. That's a nice little tangent there. So QR codes right now for a lot of Bitcoin software is very poorly implemented, in my opinion. And people are finding out that they have an actual very hard time using it, even though it's not supposed to be that way. Phones have good cameras, so they can read from screens that are kind of shittier. But, computer cameras can't read well. So it's a mess. And it's kind of interesting because, see, QR codes on screen don't really need error correction that much, right? Because they're not getting printed. They're not getting folded. You're not concerned about losing pixels. I don't understand why devs are adding error correction to those QR codes and adding unnecessary data to it, making it even harder to read. So if you're out there making QR implementations, you can probably turn error correction to 0 and lower the density. Also, I think we need new standards. But anyways, hopefully in the future that happens. Do you add error correction on the Sparrow wallet?
Well, it's not really a choice. You're following the UR spec. It does add it.
Yeah, that spec's terrible.
Well, that's your view. I mean, we have talked about it. Look, I think it's just important that we do follow a spec. I think, if we all just used our own method of doing QRs, it would be a real mess. And I think
I agree.
It would be the situation that we have with USB right now. Every time thank goodness we have Andrew Chow who maintains HWI. But to be honest, every single hardware wallet has invented their own USB protocol, and it's a meh. I mean, it really is.
So that's an interesting one. It's a shame that we don't all just use serial over USB, because that would have made things a lot simpler. The problem for the USB, though, USB's stack is too complex, and different hardware can only use USB in certain different ways. So it's not really that people chose to be different. It's just that that's a hardware limitation kind of thing. That's the best sort of framework for it. The QR spec is a little different. QRs have a certain way of being done, and I think that spec sort of disrespects the way QRs are supposed to be done. But that's when you talk about standards, everybody disagree, right? That's the nature of standards. And then everybody makes a compromise.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, for the devs who have to build the sort of wallets to tie it all together, standards are very helpful, even if they're not perfect, you know, and they make life a lot easier. I just dread to think what it would be like if every hardware wallet decided to invent its own QR approach. It would be an absolute mess.
Yeah, I think it's early enough that we can fix that problem and hopefully create something that's a lot easier for devs to implement as well. So, because I think to add a UR, you need something 7 or 9 libraries to be added to the hardware, which is completely unrealistic. So yeah, I mean, I can just sort of wave my hands until I actually propose something, or our team propose something.
I think too, you can really reduce the error correction for Bitcoin QRs, because if you're using batch 32 or 32M, it already has error correction basically built in. So
yeah,
you should be able to handle it.
That spec should never have existed. If people just have used the standard QR spec, it would already have sort of worked. Even just basic a plain text display, right, encoding, it would have worked better. Well, here's an interesting one too. I'm very skeptical that the amount of data you're going to need for interactive Taproot signatures is going to work over QR animated. It might be too much and too much back and forth. So that's where like USB or NFC or something else that's interactive might take over. We don't know. I want to see all these things, sort of like seeing how they evolve. Thankfully, it's early enough, and we can still sort of like make good decisions.
Sure. I mean, just bear in mind, there are quite a lot of hardware wallets that have already implemented the UR spec. So you say it's early, but it's not that early.
I can totally feel the, oh my God, I have to integrate another standard response.
No, actually, I really don't mind building standards to read, but a wallet has to choose a standard to display.
I agree.
I don't want to have to present the user with, which QR standard would you like to use today? That doesn't seem ideal, and I don't think we should, as an industry, try and put that burden onto users.
I agree.
So I think there has to be a very strong reason to use a different standard. As I say, we're not that early yet. It's not like we've got, one hardware wallet that's half implemented it. We probably have at least 5, all of whom use it as their default and normal approach. So yeah, it would be a big effort to switch to anything else. Concerted effort across the industry with vendors who are competing with each other. And we all know how difficult that is.
It's an interesting industry anyways. Well, the funny thing is, like, a lot of vendors just don't make it eventually, right? It's I think it's hard to sort of really get into the weeds without having something proposed.
Sure.
So Trezor-Suite version 23.2.1, preparation for extended testing for Bitcoin testnet. Well, that's nice. And replaced by Fee and Taproot. That's nice too. Zeus version 0.7.3-beta 2. QR code scanner, import QR images from gallery, biometric login, channels, view pending, and force closed channels, timer display, fast node switching, LNURL off. So Zeus is awesome. I don't know if you guys have tried it. Like, it works great with Alby and Blue Wallet, but the Alby backend integration is quite amazing. I've been using that a lot now as my default. So when people send boostograms to this show, they go to my Alby, even though it uses my address because they support LNURL proxy. And then you use Zeus as your sort of like daily wallet on your phone, even though you're using the Alby's node. Anyone played with that?
Zeus is great. I use it as my daily mobile interface to my node. It's good.
Nice.
Yeah, same here. The Lighting Node Connect integration was huge for me, where like before you'd have to connect to your node over Tor, and that never worked. But the LNC stuff uses like this mailbox proxy thing that's all encrypted and stuff, and it's super cool. So now it works extremely well.
Lyn, from a user perspective, what Lightning wallets are you using, and sort of like how you finding this space to be?
So I use a bunch of different ones to test them out. And so I've used Breez. I've also used, the really simple one, like the Wallet of Satoshi, just to see what that's like. That's the one that's kind of capturing everything. But I go out and use a bunch of different ones to test the user experience to actually see what that's like. That's kind of from like a busy person's perspective or a non super technical person's perspective. Usually, basically, the more sovereign one is, the more you kind of run into little frictions. Whereas, if you just kind of put it all in like the simple custodial thing and put it away, then it's super fast and easy, but then you're giving up all that. And that's actually one of the notes I submitted to the show, which was that I like the build out, or at least the work people are doing in like, Chalmy and eCash type of things. Because if people are going to use custodial solutions, I'd at least rather see it be private and have, the custody distributed over a broader space rather than everybody use a handful of gigantic honeypots. And so, for example, like the Fedi team, for example, Obi, they're and through Ego Death Capital, we're invested in them. But basically, what they're looking to do is make something that's kind of like Wallet of Satoshi in terms of user experience, but is more low custody and more private. But I like the work that a lot of different ones are doing, including Breez and others.
Yeah, I've sort of assumed the same approach. I've decided that all my Lightning is going to be done the normie way. I'm only using wallets that I don't have to run a node. I'm trying to find sort of like the best balance where, like, for example, this Alby implementation where they sort of give you a little bit more access and control over things, but still sort of their node. And it does work great. Breez is fantastic. Been really liking that wallet. I think they have plans of running the node or something like that, or hosted channels or something along those lines within the actual app. Roy is trying to actually, like, you know, give people their control within the technical limits of it, because, you know, I guess like most people are not gonna run their node for Lightning. And Lightning is a lot less value too, right? I mean, you know, you're not really concerned about like rug pulls from the maintainer. I think it's more like a privacy concern in my view, because like Lightning does give you some decent privacy if it's done right. But again, if you're using somebody else's node, then you're kind of doxing yourself. I don't know. Like, it seems like things are progressing. It's kind of cool that we have Ben here, because these guys are building like privacy first Lightning wallet on the browser, where the node is on the browser, and that could be easily ported to phones as well. So maybe we take that tangent. So Ben, do you want to sort of like give us a little bit of a primer on Mutiny?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, like you gave it out pretty well. Like it's a privacy focused Lightning wallet built in the browser. So it can kind of run anywhere. Like we even got it running on an Xbox browser. Like it works like on literally any device pretty much. And,
have you tried a Tesla yet?
No, we haven't. I don't have a Tesla, so we got to find someone with one. But yeah, I assume it will work on a Tesla. So yeah, like it's a Lightning wallet that kind of works anywhere, and it's going to be privacy focused. So it's built using BDK and LDK. So these two products are kind of on the forefront of all the new things happening in Bitcoin and Lightning. Like BDK is like has like Taproot and Miniscript and all that stuff, and LDK is kind of like they're like working on Bolt 12 stuff right now, and like dual funded channels and all that stuff. So a lot of like really cool new stuff is like happening in these projects because they're like a lot more new and nimble right now. They don't have a ton of users, so they can kind of just build without worrying about stuff. So we hope to be pushing kind of the boundaries and all that stuff, and seems like it's going to happen. So we're really excited about it.
Disclosure, I invested in your company. No, it's I think WASM is not talked enough about. I think this is our last chance of sort of like winning the browser crap back. For people that don't understand, like, you know, the browser is this like absurd, horrible OS on your OS with remote code execution. and on top of that, you have JavaScript. So like, it's really bad. Like it can't handle secrets. You know, you're really exposing your computer to a lot of attacks, and then you're also building in very sort of like you're building on top of mud because JavaScript and Node are not really designed to do any security stuff. It's like a package nightmare for people to audit, and so it's very bad for Bitcoin. And with WASM, you can actually compile everything into WebAssembly, right? From WebAssembly, and sort of like run applications that are a little bit more contained on the browser. And it also gives you a lot more powerful things because of all the C bindings and all that stuff. So Ben, how are you guys doing the privacy part of Mutiny?
So like with the privacy parts, like kind of like two things. One is like because we have it, on-chain and Lightning, so you kind of have to handle both separately. For the Lightning part, we're trying to like use like a lot of the cool new stuff that's happening. So we're gonna like make it like default like blinded paths once those are available, and as well like something really cool we can do with LDK is like today with like most nodes, like when I open a channel to like say like I don't know, Bitrefill, and then I open another channel to like open node, those are all both tied to the same original node that I had. So like someone can see and like use that node ID to link both those channels to me. But with LDK, it's like pretty much costless to just create a new node for every single channel. So we can have 10 channels and 10 different nodes all running in the browser that with kind of no extra overhead. So that lets us kind of separate those identities between every channel. Basically it's kind of like the don't reuse addresses version of but for Lightning. And so that should be a really big privacy improvement for sends and receives. And for the on-chain part, and we're just kind of doing traditional on-chain practices that exist today. But eventually we want to add coin join support and stuff like that. That should really help, enhancing that, especially with because most coin join wallets today, or if not all, don't really support Lightning. So you want to merge the two so you can kind of get that full-fledged experience where you don't have to go coin join in your hardware wallet or whatever, and then bring it over to your Lightning wallet and then lose all that properties you had before. So try to get a full-fledged experience of everything you want.
Well, another cool thing is you're going to be able to say, for example, when you get involved with Fedimints, right? Because those are Lightning transactions, right? To sort of receive the mints and the tokens, send and receive them. You're going to have a nice sort of a stronghold there on privacy, on how you get in and out of this eCash mints. It's so you have a private token on eCash going to a privacy-focused Lightning wallet that then can go to a on-chain transaction, all sort of contained in your Tesla browser. It's one of those things. It's there's a lot of reasons why the technicality makes the magic, but it is pretty cool, and it can really make that sort of magical experience on the browser of just the stuff just works. You have an address of that would support any kind of thing coming in and any kind of thing going out, right? With maybe just a list of transactions, and then that's it. It's pretty amazing. I'm very excited about that. Liana, version 0.2. We are going to touch back on some of this stuff, by the way, on the Lightning stuff and the Fedi stuff when you go down to the news in a little bit. My apologies to the listeners. Our show notes today are abhorrent. My fault. So Liana version 0.2, now with multisig, the second beta release of Liana. So Liana is kind of interesting. It's the guys from Revolt. They're trying to do more complex covenant-like things using pre-signed transactions. Liana is not meant for you to put real money at. It's just sort of a proof of concept. Hopefully, if Upvault gets into Bitcoin, then you're going to see the same functionality that Liana can do, but with on-chain primitives, and that could get very interesting. Breez, 1.0.18, neutrino sync, languages, and a few other updates. But the main thing for Breez is that they launched their SDK. This is very cool. Lightning is very hard. And having Lightning and Bitcoin too, SDKs for app devs and web devs to sort of build on top is kind of a big deal in my view. You can abstract the hard stuff and make sure people don't lose money, and then you can build some really cool business logic on top of that sort of is the value add of your business startup and whatever. So yeah, so their new SDK has a signer, an input parser, a Lightning node, BTC swap, fiat currencies, and an LSP. They have different sort of packages to handle each part of it. And I think their core SDK is in Rust. So it's all sort of self-contained for your nightmare phone OS of choice.
I'll jump in on Breez.
Go ahead.
Basically, yeah, through Ego Death Capital, we invest in Breez. And so I follow them a little bit more closely, obviously, than some other companies. And I do like the work that they're doing to kind of split up the parts of Lightning so that people can focus on the parts they care about. And so, for example, either Open-LSP or, the release of their SDK, it allows, different groups to focus on the parts that they want to do. So you can, basically add Lightning capabilities to an app without having to reinvent the wheel every time. If you have liquidity to employ onto the network, it makes that easier to do. Their partnership with Blockstream, I think, is a step forward. And so I think that overall, these kind of ways to make the network easier to both build on and interact with, I think, is a really big deal. And I've been covering Lightning for a few years now, and it's really kind of useful to see it progressing and making it just overall easy to use. Because if something's not easy to use, if it's not easy to build on, it's just not going to get used and built on. And so I think it's really cool to see a lot of these pieces come together.
What's the Blockstream partnership? Is it a liquidity providing kind of thing, or is it do they do other technical things there?
They use Greenlight.
Okay.
So yeah, basically you're abstracting node operation from control of it, right? And so
Very cool.
And that's just one of the ways that they can add some. Basically, there's different kind of trade-offs or features you can do when you kind of have that model. And so I think it's another way to kind of again give people options and make them be able to use the part of the network they care about or get exactly the features that they want.
Yeah, I mean, plus like Lightning is hard. It's hard to develop. It's hard to maintain. It's hard to operate. It's hard to manage. It's hard to liquidity provide. Everything around it is hard. So like having people who sort of like got ahead in some of these activities, providing the underlying technology for people to do it is nice. So for this SDK, some of the use cases that they're providing on their release here was streaming payments for streaming content, so pod streaming and value for value stuff, monetizing social media. I don't know if they integrated Zaps yet, but I hope they do soon if they haven't. Oh no, actually they have. Yes, you can pay Zaps from Breez, and they do work because I've been using it and I forgot. So on Nostra, you can do your Zaps. In-game currencies, cross-border remittances, disintermediation of P2P payments and fintech. Blixt added ability to restore with passphrase, the ability to change language, and a bunch of bug fixes. MyNode version 0.3.1, ability to swap versions of Bitcoin, ability to run Bitcoin or disrespecter. So this is great. One of my biggest pet peeves with a node in the box distribution is essentially the easy part of letting the user just run without picking a Bitcoin Core version and set of features. This is an issue because choosing Bitcoin Core versions and which settings you have on or off is you informing the network what Bitcoin should be and what Bitcoin is, right? So you are an economic node, and say, for example, you're running full RBF, you're not running full RBF. Are you choosing a pre-SegWit version of Bitcoin Core? All these things influence on what Bitcoin is and how Bitcoin moves forward. So having the users have at least the ability of changing things is kind of a big deal. I think it's like the minimum that you need to offer. Because otherwise you are essentially telling the network what these users are supposed to think Bitcoin is. That could have been Bitcoin Cash. So that's kind of a big deal. Running Bitcoin or disrespecter is kind of funny. I think is idiotic. It's kind of pointless and it doesn't really do anything, but it's great that people have choices.
I wonder if they added the full mempool RBF, which is like the other side of or disrespecter, if change your mempool policy to. I
don't know. I imagine if they're doing their disrespect, I imagine you can probably turn on because it's off by default for RBF on Core, which is unfortunate. Should have been on by default, but anyways, Jam web interface for join markets. This is really cool. I'm a big fan of join markets. It's a mixing service, or not service, it's a mixing protocol for Bitcoin that uses markets instead of centralized coordinators. The volume does change often. You could have a lot of volume there. You could have very little volume there. But if you're interested in being a market maker for Bitcoin mixing, it's a great little interface for you to use. And you can make a buck. Keeper version 1.0.1. Now Trezor and Bitbox 2 support. Change density of the QR if camera is not able to scan. See, everybody's bumping to the QR density issue because of bad standards. Import multisig using configurable details, output descriptors, and BSMS. It's very cool to see more support for that. I've been output descriptor pusher for a long time. I actually need to update. It's outputdescriptors.org. I think we only had like a handful there. It seems like a lot of more people are adding. BSMS is also nice. It's hard to implement in the actual hardware wallets because it's a lot of code. So it's easier on the client wallets. We do hope to have it on Coldcard at some point soon. It's in development.
Yeah, I actually forgot that feature earlier. So
you added it as well, right?
Yeah. So you can export after you, for example, import your Coldcard into Sparrow. You can now export the details in a BSMS format. But I must admit that the hardware wallet support is still very thin. I think we have to start somewhere, though. It's sort of a chicken and egg.
Yeah.
So, it's basically you can now export it, and you can set up a remote multi-sig, so you can send that off to someone else somewhere else in the world, and they can then pull that in. And between you can all create a wallet and then move forward. So I think that it is an important use case. Definitely the remote multi-sig wallet setup is something that does happen. And hopefully in future hardware wallets will support it, because, what we have right now is basically a less secure method. I don't mean to say that it's going to set up a bad wallet. I just mean to say that all of the checks that were written into the spec, we don't quite have the hardware wallet support for them yet. So for example, the final BSMS export, once you've created the wallet, actually has the first address in the wallet, the first receive address. And the idea is that you then import that into a hardware wallet, which then checks to see whether that address is correct. It sort of looks at its own seed and says, yes, I would have created the same thing given the other signers. So I think that there's sort of levels here, but hopefully we can get to the sort of ultimate level. That would be good. But for now, you can still, in Sparrow, and it looks like in Keeper as well, still import those BSMS files and set up your multi-sig wallet remotely.
So I'll give a little bit of background so people understand. So there's a few problems, right, that were sort of like difficulties with multi-sig. One is how do you back up, and how do you set up the quorum, right? How do you set up the script, and how do you share those XPubs with each other, all without having a guy in the middle trying to fuddle with things or to leak privacy? And this was years ago. When we launched Coldcard, we wanted a way for people to create secure multi-sig quorums, right? So if you're not doing multi-vendor, it's easier because we can make decisions. So between Coldcards, you can create a multi-sig quorum without a computer securely, right? We do that like very, very tightly. But there wasn't a lot of interest from hardware vendors to do any of this stuff. And also people have different opinions and sort of like different hardware limitations. So between Hugo, so Nunchuk, Shift Crypto, and us, Coinkite, we created this BSMS standard as a means of creating a quorum, right? And sharing that information and having all the details that you need to recover a multi-sig wallet, aside from the private keys. And the main challenge with BSMS is that the standard is okay, but the amount of code you have to write on the embedded system to support it is quite extensive. And it touches every part of the possible money-losing operations. So I think we were hoping that eventually the client software starts to support it, and there is sort of like client software on client software sort of starting to play with it to validate the idea, so that once like we see, okay, fine, the market wants this, then we go in and put the effort into touching a lot of code that's dangerous to touch to implement this on the hardware side. On the output descriptor side, it was a bit easier. And that was already supported, and it's kind of nice to see some hardware wallets supporting now. And I think output descriptors will be superseded by mini scripts, fortunately and unfortunately. So we'll see how that plays out. Blockstream Jade 0.1.43 facilitated BIP39 passphrase, add option to calculate final word, support sign message via QR, add wallet logout option. So that's cool. It's nice to see more signing of messages. It kind of like maybe you can sign your message before you can sign your file before you send it to the Coldcard with addresses to deposit. There's a lot of sort of like interesting interplay that could happen in the future with hardware wallets supporting proper Bitcoin message signing. Seed Signer version 0.6.0. So they launched their Seed Signer OS. That's a nice upgrade. It's one less layer that was sort of like very complex and full of stuff that was unrelated. Next is for them, we'd love to see is an open firmware implementation so that we don't have to trust the stuff from Broadcom. Single multi-sig receive address explorer, BIP85 deterministic seed derivation. It's also nice to see people adding BIP85. Support for paying 2-Taproot. Compact seed QR now enabled by default. More responsive QR dismissal and microSD removal. And a few other little things. Very nice. Cashu version 0.9.3. Pay to Nostr, NIP5 support. Cashu is really cool. It's another eCash implementation where the mint is not multisig. It's just a single minter. I just love the speed in which Kale, I can never say his name, Kali is like advancing with this. It's a super cool project. It helps validate the eCash solution for like the improvement of the custodial solutions with privacy. It's very cool. Alby version 1.27.0. So they added a new sign schnorr function. They added Zaps. Zaps is, NIP57 on Nostr. It's just a standard on how to send a Nostr note with Lightning on it or Lightning invoice with it. Bitcoin stablecoin wallet. So, by the way, Alby is a browser wallet. It's a browser extension. It is surprisingly good to the extent that a browser extension can be due to the limitations of the browser. These guys are doing like really, really good work. Fountain version 0.6.4. Search editorial, new search page design, which allows listeners to browse selection of noteworthy podcasts. Are you guys using Fountain to listen or any other Pod 2.0 app to listen or to stream sats?
I experimented with it when I went on a podcast that used it. I haven't dove into it enough personally.
We're going to add you to the splits. Ben?
I've barely tried it. I don't really listen to podcasts anymore, so it's hard. But I don't know.
I don't know. I hear you. Craig?
I haven't used it yet, but I need to. It's on the list to try.
It seems kind of silly that like people are going to be interested in doing this, sort of like sending some sats, but it is surprisingly fun and there's quite a people using it. We get a lot of boostograms, which are essentially messages with Lightning on it. All right, Damus version 1.1.0. Will has been pushing hard on Damus. This is the latest version that's actually on the store. So now it supports zaps and you can customize the zaps. I think Nostr is probably now the biggest use of Lightning volume-wise and transaction count-wise. It's absolutely insane. Mr. Jack got a little overexcited last night and he was tipping everybody 1 million sats. And I have absolutely no clue of how many of those he sent, but he were a lot. So there was some action there. I don't think Lightning has seen that kind of volume ever. And it stood the test. I mean, like my wallet did not break. I've been zapping people like a maniac for the last couple of weeks and never had any issues. So good on Alby and Breez, which were the two that I used for it. Have you guys been playing?
I've been using Alby with Nostr. I've been liking that whole setup. It's really convenient.
Yeah, I've been loving it. I've been zapping a bunch, but I think like maybe by transaction count, it's like highest. It's like boosting Lightning a bunch, but definitely not by volume because like these are like little like 1,000 sat payments versus like
I don't know, dude. I sent 13,000 sats as my default. Like, is the leets?
Oh yeah.
People like I get like 50K sats, 100K sats all the time too. Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? Because like Lightning is both visible and also not visible, right? I mean, depending on what kind of node people are using, like, it could be completely off grid in terms of like analytics out there. What's the best way so far to find out volume in Lightning?
You can't really. I mean, like people will like do like you can see like the total public capacity of channels. but like that's only a fraction of like all Lightning. And then I don't know, then like, Wall Satoshi and people like that will report their transaction counts and stuff. That's probably the best estimation we have. It's kind of hard because it's built to be private. So
yeah, it's kind of funny, right? Like it's like hardware wallets. Like people are like, okay, how do you know if your product's successful? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I cannot tell how much money people put on my product, right? Like, it's a very weird sort of like new world. As privacy improves, you're going to have to just use like personal heuristics and sort of like some consumer research, but you're not going to be able to get data anymore, right? I mean, and if we're successful, it's going to be even less data. The more successful we are, the less data we're going to have. It's strange because like, how do you invest in companies? How do you like, how do you justify, advertising or whatever? Like all these things were sort of done traditionally with stats on volume and count and whatever, right? It's an interesting new world out there.
I've been tracking Lightning for a while, and it's tricky because, as was said, things like public capacity are very flawed metrics. You can put it on one chart, but it's very flawed. So far, the best research I've seen is like when basically one big node operator basically shows what they're doing. So whether it's River, while Satoshi releases numbers, there's Arcane Research. I forget who they partner with, but they partner with some, and they kind of they've done 2 versions now of these like state of the Lightning Network reports that are very detailed. And it's kind of like what River did, where, they'll open the lid on like, this section of the network that they can see and talk about some of the metrics. So you get things like velocity, how much, given a amount of capacity, how much actual throughput or transactions are going through, both in terms of volumes and numbers. So basically it's like you see little parts of it, but because it's actually pretty decentralized and private, you actually can't really see the whole thing. You can only kind of focus in on little parts of it.
Like having big numbers helps adoption, right? Because it gives like media something to write about. They like to see numbers and charts. I wonder if to help our case, but not destroy privacy, if there is like ways that maybe like we come up with some standards for signing, essentially like signing your volume somehow. So you can kind of show the volume anonymously. That could be very interesting. Maybe that's a Tony project, Ben, coming up with very clever ways of sharing volume and anonymized data on this so that we can sort of like keep the market engaged into sort of like investing in like Lightning projects and things, because it will get harder, right? I mean, unlike hardware wallets, which I can sort of like show, hey, this is how much hardware I shipped. It's going to be much harder to show like a market opportunity size to the market.
Yeah, especially for like someone like Breez we were talking about earlier with their SDK, it'll be really hard for them because it's like this, they'll like have some other company use their SDK, like we have no idea what they're doing kind of thing. So it gets even harder there. So it'll be interesting.
Hey, Craig, when do we see you on Nostr? Zapping.
I'm there.
Are you? I couldn't find your handle there.
I follow you.
I couldn't. Man, I'm completely like I've bankrupt my notifications there. Like I don't even try to go back too far to check. So no, I'll look for you again. Maybe we do a little exchange of keys off channel. But yeah, okay, so that's cool. Do you see anything that might be interesting for Sparrow to do with Lightning or Nostr in some way?
I've kind of just watching the network grow and evolve, and obviously I sort of use it. So I spend time, doing all the things that is required for managing your own node. And yeah, it's still, as you were saying earlier, still hard. It's still hard to do all of these things. So I'm not yet feeling that the time is right to bring it into Sparrow, if that is ever a good idea. It's kind of just an open question in my mind. I guess we'll see. I'm going to keep an open mind and see how it goes. But right now, I think there's enough things with supporting layer 1, enough work to do there, that I'm quite happy to keep trucking along and kind of be a Lightning user, but not necessarily a dev. But yeah, we'll see.
I feel it's like, we want to play with Lightning. We want to build things on Nostr, but like there's just so much to do, and like you can't do everything. I think, for example, Electrum shouldn't have added Lightning to the main implementation because it created like this massive extra package in their software that made it hard. But yeah, it's nice to see that you're sort of like paying attention to it. Okay, TORQ, node management tool for large Lightning Network nodes. Oh, that's cool. I don't use it. I don't know much about it. If you guys do, chime in. If not, I'll move on. Fedimint mining pools. So this is super cool. I can't wait for this to happen. So Lightning pool operators have a massive problem, right? Like, how do you distribute the loot? And how do you do that privately? And how do you do that fairly, provably? And how do you manage a bunch of tiny UTXOs, right? Because like it's super, super tiny payments unless you let the mining operator collect a bigger amount before they do payouts. And this federated mining pools using Fedimint eCash resolves a lot of those problems where because of the smallest unit on eCash is infinite, so they can actually do the payments and do a lot of the coordination and provability of the fairness of the payments using this sort of like, for lack of word, a sidechain to do this. This is one of the most sort of exciting things I see for Fedimints coming up. Justin and team have been sort of like quiet, heads down, getting some work done now, but hopefully I can get him and Kali and Eric to come over and do a panel sort of exploration on eCash. For the people that don't know, eCash came much before Bitcoin. It's like a project of the 80s by David Chaum. So yeah, so that's a very cool project. Keep an eye on it. We have a link to the proposal and stuff on the show notes. Habla.news. This was a bounty that I put out. I wanted to have a Nostr replacement for Stack, for Substack, and for Medium. Uses a long form kind. I think it's kind 80, kind 23. No, kind 1,000 something. Can't remember now. But essentially, you have a censorship-resistant broadcast method for long form posts, right? So instead of using a blog or instead of using Substack, you push your long form kind notes there, and they help coordinate all that stuff. The notes live in relays. Habla has no control over that. And as more clients support long form notes, this has a lot of legs, and you can add comments. Comments are automatic because you're just adding a note to a note, and you can transport all your access to your data to different clients. This makes me very bullish that, you know, if a politician in a major country decides to say, hey, you can't publish anymore on Substack, you can right now have a solution for it. This exists, it's working, and it's impressive. So awesome to see. If people want to post bounties for Nostr projects, bountsr.org. Just make a pull request there, add your bounty. Folks are sort of taking them and making it happen. It's pretty cool. The speed of development there is fast and furious. Have you guys played this Habla.news yet?
I just had a look at it now. Yeah, it's early days, but it looks pretty cool.
It's just so many, like, I mean, between Lightning, Nostr, and Bitcoin, like, I kind of feel like I might need to spin off like a few versions of this show because like it's just like, it's out of control. One good thing though is it prevents us from wasting time with politics and other useless stuff because there's just too many awesome things to talk about. All right. Any other project updates from software that I might have missed here, guys?
None that I can think of.
All right. So we'll move on to Project Spotlight. If anything comes to mind, just let us know.
Oh, wait, there was one. Sorry, I've forgotten. It is, what is the name of it? There was a new BIP 47 implementation, the first one on iOS that came out.
Oh, okay, yeah. So do you want to give a primer on BIP 47? Just a very short one.
Yeah, sure. So basically, BIP 47 is a layer one way in which you can publish a static code. So, not a Bitcoin address, but rather something we call a payment code. You can put that anywhere. You can put it on a placard as you walk down the sort of street, and anyone with a BIP47 capable wallet can then pay you in a private manner. So if you put a Bitcoin address on that placard, then you will find that everyone can see how much money was sent to you. But if you use BIP47, they can't, right? And I think that that's quite an important and useful thing for us in the world today. You know, obviously, if we can all run a node, Lightning node, then, you know, that's a very easy way to do it. But there are many people in this world who cannot run servers, and to be able to just create a BIP47 payment code is for them, I think, a much easier way to, or much more private way, I should say, to be able to receive. So it's really nice to see that BIP47 is coming to iOS. It was the sort of the platform that was unserved for a long time. It's coming on a wallet called Stack Wallet, which is a multi-coin wallet. So not probably the stuff we would usually talk about here, but nevertheless, great that people who have iPhones now have an option and can both send and receive with BIP47. So good times.
Very cool. We'll add to the notes so people know where to download it. And now to the boost parts, guys. Thanks for contributing, and thanks for the notes. It's a lot of fun to get these notes streaming into my Lightning wallet. So Purple Elephant, 250,000 sats. Best one yet. Ordinals and inscriptions show. Thanks. Eric 99, Stay Humble Stack Sats. JC Denton, absolutely fantastic pod with a great panel. I learned a lot. Thank you. Absolutely great episode from Michael Matuleaf. Thank you, sir. Law of Bitcoin, appreciate you. I appreciate you back. Ape, Myth, and Deer. Double boost, Upvault makes security good. Also, shout out to Stack Wallet for being the first wallet to offer paynims on iOS. Timely, because we discussed that on this show. Tom Zer BC Zun. I can listen to NVK talk all day. Keep it up. Great show. It's funny because the handles don't come with cases, right? Uppercase. So it's surprisingly hard to read out the names out of the NIMs, but I try, guys. I try. So Project Spotlight, Ben, do you wanna brief us on blastr and bitcoin-waila?
Yeah, blastr is like a little Nostr thing we did at Mutiny. If you guys saw our wait list, like basically we had the option to sign up with Nostr, and we'd like DM you, like welcome to the waitlist and stuff. And in doing that, we kind of like built this little tool to like send to a bunch of relays, like using Cloudflare's like queuing system. So it's like super cheap. And basically I realized that we could turn this into like its own kind of version of a Nostr relay. So what it does is basically if you add it to your list of relays, you can't receive events from it, but when you send events, it'll send it to like 300 different relays. So it's kind of a way to like just blast any of your stuff to like all of Nostr, which like for like notes and stuff, it's not too useful, but we found like a lot of people like using it for things like their like profile updates and their follows. So like that makes sure it's everywhere. So like everyone can see it and you don't like lose it from like switching between clients. And it's doing like, I think yesterday we did like 15,000 events. So we're doing like,
nice.
a few percent of like all of Nostr events, which is pretty cool.
Very nice.
So hopefully the spammers haven't found it, but it seems like it's going pretty well. Nice.
And bitcoin-waila?
Yeah, this is a thing that we're like with like Mutiny, it's gonna be Lightning and on-chain, and you know, there's now like 15 different like kind of things you can scan with the QR code now, and with Bitcoin that like you might be able to pay. So we kind of just made a tool that like combines all those things and just kind of tells you what it is. So it's like Bitcoin, what am I looking at? So if it gives you an address or like a BIP21 URI or, you know, a Lightning address, anything like that, you can scan it and then it'll like give you all the individual parts. Like if it's a BIP21 URI, you could like do like dot address and it'll give you the address. If it has an invoice, you could do like dot invoice, it gives you the invoice, stuff like that, to try to make it easy for us to decode without having to like create all this custom logic somewhere and then have to copy paste it into a different project, try to make it like a universal project for everyone.
Very nice. Checkmessage.org, I sort of mentioned, is just a little project for people to be able to properly check Bitcoin signatures. It works with Taproot as well. Rust Coldcard interface project. The name of the maintainer is Alfred. Alfred created this Rust library to talk to Coldcard. That's nice. Labelbase.space. It's a label management service for Bitcoin transaction addresses. Craig, do you have any knowledge of this project?
Yeah, so I am aware of it. I haven't had a detailed look yet, but basically the idea is that you can use it as an online store, an encrypted online store, in the same way that you might have a password manager, which kind of allows you to enter passwords and get those passwords and sync passwords around, so you can do the same with your labels across different wallets once obviously those wallets integrate. So I think the idea is very, very cool. It's certainly an idea that's been around for a long time. If some of you might remember that there was an plugin for Electrum called the Labels plugin, which had similar sort of ideals, but this one is built on BIP 329, which we mentioned earlier. So it's a standards-based thing, and it's sort of just much more modern in terms of the way that it handles all of the authentication. It looks very, very cool. I mean, it's really only been around for about a month now, but certainly on my list to have a better look at and hopefully build something in Sparrows that we can, use it and be able to talk to it, and people can sync labels.
Is it end-to-end encrypted, the notes, so that you don't leak any privacy issues to this website?
I'm actually not 100% sure yet, but, I know that the dev is definitely, very aware of all of the pitfalls, and, if there are any issues, I'm sure that they can be resolved. So, yeah, I'm quite bullish on this one.
Cool. lnsat.me. It's a Lightning address with different names and connect them directly to your node. That's cool. It's probably like a Lightning proxy website, I imagine. TurinPay, full API solution to let merchants off and online to receive Bitcoin payments in real time and free forever. BIP 324. I kind of wanted to just bring this to people's attention because it's sort of like really moving. It's an awesome BIP. It's a much needed BIP. Maybe we do like a whole sort of episode on this. It's essentially a good peer-to-peer way of having encrypted communication between Bitcoin nodes. Right now, Bitcoin nodes are not talking to each other in an encrypted manner. So it's very easy to intercept. It's very easy to try to change the data. It's very easy to highlight the data in your sort of like company's firewall. It's not good. It's right now what we have is very pedestrian. So like this is a much needed upgrade to the Bitcoin peer-to-peer communication, especially for miners, if we don't want them to get shot in places where it's kind of dangerous for them. So BIP324.com is a good place to start. The BIP is a number assigned, and it's getting a lot of conversation on it. It's very cool. Are you guys sort of following BIP 324?
Yeah, I've been following it for a bit. I think it's, like you said, it's pretty awesome. Like, I know they're doing a lot of like really fancy stuff. Like, they didn't have to use like SecP 256K1 for like the encryption, but they did just so like, there's no new cryptographic assumptions or anything. And some of the stuff they're doing is like something called like shaping, where you can like, you could make it look like the bytes you're sending are like a different protocol. So you could like have your Bitcoin node look like it's a, like a Skype call or something. So kind of cool the stuff they're like doing there.
It's very important work as the world gets more complicated. Bitnob launches virtual dollar card. I don't know too much about this project, but I wanted to add here to the notes so in case you guys do. So please let me know. Okay, so we're gonna go now into the news and noteworthy stuff. Part of the show, guys. We've survived the software updates, and Lyn's still here. Why don't we go over some of the stuff? I think the first one there, the Breez Open-LSP model. Maybe Lyn, you have some thoughts on that. It's a much needed service.
Yeah, we touched on that before. Basically, Breez breaking up the different components of Lightning so people can focus on things they care about. And so basically, this is a way to try to get more liquidity into the network by people that, pools of capital that have Bitcoin. They want to earn a yield on it without going into, lending and all that kind of thing. And so by providing liquidity, they can get into it. And Breez just basically makes it easier to, you can use their software, you can tie it into their ecosystem, and it makes it, it lowers the barrier of entry between, people that want to earn yield on their Bitcoin and actually making that happen.
So I'm a little skeptical on the economics of LSPs, like in the future. I know now it doesn't matter, right? I mean, now we're just sort of like going to pay to make it happen kind of thing. The opportunity cost for the capital at rest, really, right? Because like LSPs essentially just holding a bunch of Bitcoin at rest and at risk, right? Because those funds are hot. So, I know us as Bitcoiners, like don't want yield and, put in cold storage and all that stuff. That works great for us. But, institutional capital out there, especially institutional, wants to see returns on capital at rest, right? Like they want, like the count number must go up as opposed to the number go up only. And I'm curious, like what your thoughts are on, like would there be enough interest paid, right, on that capital at risk to, one, justify the risk of those funds being live, and two, maybe they do something else with the money, right? Just the opportunity cost on that capital question is interesting to me.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good set of questions. I think at this early phase, right, the amounts of capital that we're talking about are not super big in many cases. And I think one is when you actually combine the liquidity, like not an independent one, but they're actually, trying to build it out. So for example, they want to make another app work, and so they want to provide liquidity for it. I think that's an economic model that's going to be around for a while. The question is whether pure independent liquidity service providers make sense. I think it's a generally safer model than what the other, there's like this strong knee-jerk reaction for yield everywhere. And I think that's a safer model than some of the rest. So I think in that context, it's damage control, and there is demand for it. And it's like, okay, instead of going into that, if you want yield, at least going into this, because you're actually simultaneously earning some yield and you're ideally making the network easier to use. And so your yield's actually going for a good purpose rather than,
to be shorting Bitcoin.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not going to, casino purposes and kind of even working against you. So it's a way to earn yield while also strengthening the network, which I think in the early phase, the network makes sense. I think the bigger the network gets, the more it just becomes a pure economic question, because no one feels like at that point, no one feels like there's a dearth of liquidity, for example, if there's already plenty of liquidity. And so I think it's early on in the process still, and breaking this out and giving people the options lets us see what works. And in Roy's latest article, he had a really good chart showing basically how velocity compares to, the interest rate you can earn, right? Which, as you'd expect, basically the more throughput you have in a channel, it's a pretty linear relationship with how much yield you're earning. It's basically a signal for you whether or not you're deploying your liquidity well or not. And so I think it's a useful part of the network. I don't have a strong view of how large it's going to get. And I think that what makes sense in one era of the network could make, less sense or more sense in a different era of the network. But I do think it makes sense at this kind of early phase of the network where liquidity is still, tight in many cases.
Well, reality is, right? I mean, if we're doing, Visa level transactions on Lightning, we're going to need a ton of capital, like in this LSPs. Like, I mean, like crazy amounts of Bitcoin are going to have to be in these. So ideally, like there'll be enough demand and enough value on those transactions, value add, right? So that you can justify the cost of that capital to be there. I find that sort of economic question very interesting. It's like I can see the demand will be there. I don't see how the economics pay for that demand. I don't know if it will be an equilibrium there, but the demand is. So like somebody's gonna try to make it happen. I don't know. Maybe they'll do more esoteric stuff with the DLCs and try to find extra pay somehow to justify the capital being there. But yeah, the liquidity part of Lightning is one of the most sort of like one of the hardest problems I think there will be, and one of the most interesting things on how people solve.
I agree.
Wallets of Satoshi processed over 1,500,000 Lightning payments last week. Yeah, that's Noster. BTC Pay Server adds Wasabi Wallet Coin Joint Coordination Protocol for all merchants. That's pretty cool. It's nice. It's like fully integrated with the merchant system. It's nice to see privacy like as integral part of things. You know, trade-offs with Wasabi Wallet as they are sort of like regulated, and they do have chain analysis on there. But you know,
this is using a different coordinator. They set up their own, so you don't have any of those problems. And then they're also donating all the fees to HRF and OpenSats.
That is pretty cool. So then there you go. I mean, there really is very little criticism there towards this solution. What else? Fedimint Hackathon winners, first place. Well, I'm not going to go through them, but any one of these that you guys want to talk about?
I think the first place one's pretty awesome. The stability pool stuff.
Do you want to give a? I think we actually had a little discussion about that at the Nashville Bit Devs. I remember now.
Yeah, yeah.
Ben, do you want to talk a little bit about this? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so I guess for a little context, when they released this, Justin's a good friend of mine, so I was like, how would I win first place in this? And he's like, you got to build a stablecoin thing on top of Fedimint. And then I didn't build this, but someone did, basically a stablecoin kind of thing on top of Fedimint. So it kind of lets people like either propose to go short or long Bitcoin, but you're holding Bitcoin, so you either go like even or leverage long. And basically kind of lets you like mock a stablecoin on top of Fedimint. And I don't know, it's pretty cool. Like the idea is like, I was talking to some people and they're like, oh, they'll just like go leverage long here on the Fedimint and then like on some centralized exchange, like cover themselves. They're not just like naked long. But other people are like, oh, just, screw it. I'll take the risk. I'm pretty bullish Bitcoin. It'll work out anyways. But yeah, you get like a fee for it and stuff. And I think it's pretty cool. Like it'll kind of lets you have like Fedimint be this, not just a Bitcoin kind of thing, but it lets it be for like any kind of use case can now be built on top of it, because if you don't care about Bitcoin, you can still just hold dollars and then still do all the cool Fedimint stuff.
So I think my criticism at the meetup was that like both sides of the bet are holding the same asset on the same asset market dynamics with an extremely volatile asset, which is Bitcoin. Like it's hard for you to hedge if you're using the same asset as the collateral. So like I'm just, my curiosity there goes into like how do they solve some of those problems, or it's something that they are not addressing yet?
Yeah, I mean, like if Bitcoin went to zero, like yeah, you're both wrecked. But I think like in the paper it says like it can handle up to like a 75% draw within like 10 minutes or something. So it's supposed to be pretty dynamic, but I don't know exactly how all that works.
We had an 85% draw for longer than 15 minutes. So
yeah.
But listen, this is, I guess, the kind of stuff that it's too early for them to address.
I'll make a broader point about the hackathon as a whole. I think it shows the flexibility of that protocol. Basically, by having that modular design, basically anyone, when this is kind of out in the wild more, people can set up a Fedimint. You could keep it really simple and just have eCash, or you can add all these extra modules, all these extra features that people build, almost like like an app store, or like anyone that runs like WordPress. There's all these different plugins you can do to like customize your website. Fedimints are kind of going in that direction, and that it eliminates kind of debates about what it should be like, because you have this really basic like backbone, and then anyone can have their own type of Fedimint. Some of these other ones that are not near the top, like the other hackathon winners, were like little storage apps and things like that. Because one of the cool things about a federation like this is that it can serve as like a hub for like a community in a developing country, and it can serve as like small file repository. It can serve as, it could run like a Nostr relay. You could have like the same community that's running the Fedimint can run like a Nostr relay. There's kind of like, it almost is a hub for the community to kind of organize around some of their technical stuff, which is especially in areas where less hardware access, less bandwidth access. It's a way of kind of sharing resources together. You also touched earlier on the Fedi pool idea, and when you hear statistics like how many Nigerians or how many Argentinians, for example, are using, Bitcoin, stablecoins, things like that. One of the downsides is that a lot of that's happening on places like Binance, right? So when you hear like these really big adoption statistics, it's kind of tempered by the fact that a lot of people just have counts on these gigantic international honeypots. And the question is, okay, how can you take that enthusiasm, but then break it up into smaller and more private chunks that are more local and that are more, maybe aligned with the community? And so that's part of why I find this technology so interesting.
Well, I mean, the thing that like Bitcoin and Lightning, you have a hard time is like, scale with like 8 billion people who don't have a lot of money, right?
Exactly.
And, like the smallest sat, in Bitcoin, it's still like going to be hard to subdivide, in Lightning for you to scale to all these people. Once you draw this really out, right, into billions of people, like, we're gonna need like this extremely sort of like separate monetary solutions like eCash, at least in my view, right? And what's cool about it is that eCash didn't happen before because Bitcoin didn't exist. There was no good source of like censorship resistant off and on ramps and sources of truth. Right, like you couldn't anchor anything in a place where you can find some truth in a decentralized environment. And the Fedimint stuff and the Cashu and all these sort of solutions kind of like really, the stars are aligning for eCash to happen. And, poor people need something that is cheaper than a SAT at scale.
Yeah, I think it scales both privately and effectively in those types of markets. And then even if you're in a market where, I mean, it's not like in competition with, say, a hardware wallet, because, for example, you might want like a Fedimint wallet as your spending wallet, your private in and out Lightning and things like that. And then if the balance gets too big, you pull it into something that's a different custody model, like self-custody and things like that. And so I think it's a useful layer that's, I'm hopeful to see it, roll out and be reasonably well adopted.
I've said it many times, like hardware wallets don't belong in people's pockets. It belongs in the safe somewhere else. People shouldn't carry the private keys to real money, nor information about the Bitcoins with them either. So like, don't have, your big pile watch only wallet on your phone because, somebody could force you to display that. And if bad guys don't know how much you have or where you have it, is already a huge security improvement. Right, on top of not having access to the keys, because if they know, then they might beat you into they find where the private keys are. So yeah, don't put your hardware wallets in your pockets and carry them around. And spending money on apps is the way to go. And Craig, I actually have a very I'm not going to put you on the spot, of course, but a very selfish request here for Sparrow. I'd love to have a eCash wallet, very rudimentary and very sort of unfeaturedful, that is desktop base of Sparrow's caliber. So if you ever find a time and you're interested in just sort of like adding an extra tab there so I can send and receive eCash, would be much appreciated.
Sure. To be honest, I haven't spent a lot of time looking at the eCash thing. I'll have to dive into it more and try and understand what that would look like. So yeah, heard.
If you're ever looking for features, something to do, because there isn't enough to do.
No, true.
All right. Nostr mobile clients, Nozzle, Daisy, Amethyst. So like Nostr is now lots of clients around. I guess I should mention, I closed the bitcoinhackers.org Mastodon. It now redirects to a goodbye note and information on how to get into Nostr. Mastodon is a shitcoin, is a terrible protocol. ActivityPub is a disaster. It's just centralization into new benevolent dictators. It's essentially a collection of feudalists. And anyways, overall, really bad. So if you're curious of why and where and what happened to bitcoinhackers.org, just go to the domain and there'll be a little explanation there. It was fun while it lasted, and then it wasn't fun anymore. Qala Africa announced strategic partnership with Nodo. Okay, that's cool. Goal is to educate next wave of Bitcoin Lightning developers across Africa. That's good to see. Cashu tutorial by BTC sessions. If you're trying to understand what the fuck we're talking about in regards to eCash, go see that tutorial. Once you send and receive a few eCash tokens, it becomes a little bit more obvious and a little bit more parsable. Wyoming legislature passes bill to protect Bitcoin private keys from courts. If you guys want to weigh in, feel free. Not sure if there is much to talk about on that one. Bitcoin Core quality assurance and testing maintainer Marco Falk steps down. I think a lot of core devs just about had it with fake Satoshi trying to sue them for liability in the terrible courts of the UK. So, but we do need people who are full-time on Bitcoin and have deep overview of the whole code base to the extent that you can and remain there for many, many years. So if you're looking to be a Bitcoin maintainer, be a NIM, please. Stop doxing yourself. Thank you, Marco, for putting all these years in. Hey, Craig, how do you feel about maintaining Bitcoin software and liability and issues like that? Ben, too. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I look at this. It's obviously not good news. We're down to 4 maintainers now, I believe. And what happens if they start to quit? I guess where it feels this is going is we're going to have to see if this Craig Wright thing is actually the reason. We're going to have to see either we're going to end up with no Bitcoin core maintainers, or one of them is going to have to stand up to him in court, obviously with, I would hope, the financial backing of a lot of people, but nevertheless, an unpleasant thing to have to go through. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but it does feel like if this is indeed a real threat, we're going to have to face that threat at some point in some way. So I'm not quite sure how it's going to play out, but I think it's not going to help for people to hide. Ultimately, we're going to have to figure it out in some way or form.
A lot of people misunderstand what the Bitcoin core maintainer does and the powers that it has and things like that. So I highly recommend listening to, I think it was the previous episode, we spent 2 hours explaining how Bitcoin development works, so people can have a better understanding. Nobody is sort of like they can merge, but it doesn't mean you have to run that software. It doesn't mean it doesn't have scrutinized. They're not like superpower people. They're just very well trusted people to do things so that we can save a little bit of time. And they provide incredible feedback because they have very good understanding of the code base. Bitcoin would definitely survive without any maintainer. Like that's not it'll be less efficient, but it's completely doable. There are funds that help devs fight in court. So COPA is doing some of that. OpenSats is doing some of that. There's a lot of private donors that are doing some of that. So I encourage people to not be too afraid. If you find yourself in that situation, reach out to Bitcoiners and you're going to find that there is money out there to fight the stuff back. So don't be in despair. And maybe like we need more people in countries with like better better rights and better protections for free speech and things like that to be the maintainers or be a NIM. It's not too hard to be a NIM. It's just there is trade-offs, but I think the future is going to be NIMs and people in countries where there is more freedom. So the UK is one of the worst places for this. So yeah, it's bad news, but I think it comes with the territory, right? I mean, it's surprising that it took that long for people to be attacked through the fiat maxi way, which is courts. All right, Lightning Node, LNHub.io, where Blue Wallet provides. Also, Blue Wallet is closing down its custodial Lightning solution. Also surprising it took that long, but that's a trend we're going to start seeing, and probably eventually any custodial Lightning is going to be KYC'd. So something to keep your attention to and maybe learn how to do non-custodial Lightning. This is good news. Cash App users bought 7.1 billion worth of Bitcoin in 2022. That's a bit of cash. Do you guys have any? Do you guys follow Square's financial updates or anything like that? Blockform or Square?
I mean, not really, but it's a lot of money. It's good to see.
And Cash App is Bitcoin only, right? Bitcoin mining firms Hut 8 and US Bitcoin Corp announced merger. Well, I guess they're not going bankrupt, so that's an improvement. UK courts rules Craig Wright has no copyright claim on Bitcoin. That's fantastic. One little win there. Crypto exchange Kraken settles with SEC over unregistered staking services. That was kind of bullshit. Jesse Powell had like an interesting note on this. Do you guys have any comments on this?
The SEC sucks. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it felt like selective enforcement, right? I mean, like you have all these exchanges doing complete absurd things and then they go after like Kraken, which is a reasonably small exchange compared to others. You know, like they were probably just looking for case law. But then when you have somebody settling, then you don't get case law on the matter. So yeah, I highly recommend reading the Bitcoin Magazine article on it. We have
there's been a trend recently, the SEC and others going after some of the the actors that are not bad in the space, right? So it's funny that Kraken got this, and it's also Custodia Bank had their application denied, and they were trying to be a safer way of doing this that many other banks are doing, and it's like the ones that were like doing fraud were like not, they were the ones cozying up and getting a lot of the positive attention, and the ones that are, I think doing better work are the ones ironically getting slapped around.
Yeah, no, it's the fiat maxes don't fight the way Bitcoiners think they do. It's not going to be because they found a security issue on Bitcoin Core's code. What they're going to do is they're going to start FTX. They're going to money laundry through there. They're going to short Bitcoin. They're going to inflate Bitcoin, paper Bitcoin. They're going to do selective enforcement on the good actors. That is their game, right? Like and also they want the bad guys to do better because the bad guys look worse for regulation purposes. If you have good actors having licenses, this means they lose the capacity of having bad news to do legislation over. It's that's how the fiat maxes do it. El Salvador to open a Bitcoin embassy in Texas. Look at that. Bitcoin NFTs protocol ordinal surpasses 100,000 inscriptions. So a lot of JPEGs. Did you? Well, we did a whole episode on inscriptions with Casey and Rindell. And Ben, were you there? I can't remember who else was.
No, I wasn't there.
And I don't know. Do you guys have any comments about ordinals, or are you guys ordinal out?
I'm curious. I believe that ordinals are around, sort of collecting art and it's what I don't see coming out of the ordinals community is much discussion of the actual works themselves. It all just seems to be very much around, buying the new thing. So I'm trying to understand whether there's a genuine, desire for the collectibles and appreciation of them for themselves, or whether there's just a greater fool theory at play here. I'm trying to figure that out because I'm genuinely curious. Sparrow was one of the first recommended wallets and remains one of the recommended wallets, even though it has no ordinals features. So I interact with many ordinals users, and I'm really curious to understand what drives them. Why do they want to get into this? What's their reason? I don't know if you guys have any sort of insights on that, but I'm not seeing a lot so far that makes me think that the sort of arena is really going to be, I don't know, just built on strong foundations.
I mean, like NFTs were a great way for you to mine tax losses and money laundering, like all art, really. Like, I mean, the art market is pretty much that. And I think it will be the same. There's genuine artists trying to create stuff and like interesting, pretty things. The majority of it is crap, of course. What's interesting though is, the art is in a block. The art will live there forever, or the crap. And that's an interesting aspect that was not true with the NFTs on Ethereum, right? Like there was like literally a scam, right? Like you're buying a link to Amazon. What Casey did is he did things the Bitcoiner way, right? So like it's actually in there. And I mean, ordinal theory is its own sort of like wacko fun thing for some people. Like, I'm indifferent to it. It's some number theory on like how you pick which Satoshi owns what. But the inscriptions hack was kind of interesting. It sort of like helped us see like side effects that you can have on Bitcoin updates and things. I think it opened the eyes of a lot of people on Bitcoin updates. It could actually have negative effects now because there is updates that we want, and people might be like very turned off by it because of this stuff. It's also creating a floor price for block space, which is kind of interesting too. We finally have full blocks, right? I mean, the blocks are meant to be full. That's why they make, that's how it works. It's interesting when something comes and creates demand for Bitcoin, regardless of the reasons, and demand for blocks too. So it's an interesting, tricky subject, but it is interesting nonetheless. Lyn or Ben, like, do you guys have any opinions of this, or just sort of like, kind of like, or do no doubt?
I mean, I've been following a little bit. I mean, it's all the classic thing where one, it obviously there's more people interested in Bitcoin because of it that are, coming out from other ecosystems. Some, they run nodes. On the other hand, it's, it fills up block space and, can add to, just overall storage requirements and bandwidth and things like that. I think I had one tweet on it, and it was just like basically saying I don't care. I don't find it interesting yet. We'll see if this, the prior NFT spikes for like these fads that, it's like people are trading it, they're speculating on it, and then it just kind of dies, liquidity goes away. I think we'll see if it's like a year from now, if people are still, really talking about these things at scale. I think that then that could change discussion. But so far, I just, I think it's if people want to have fun with it, sure. There are some trade-offs, and I think your point, I also noticed too, that essentially that it does show how you can have unintended outcomes from updates, and that could be good or bad going forward. So I've just so far not really had a strong view on this. It's kind of like a lot of people are trying to build this like monument, and then while like the cement's still like fresh, people are like putting their handprints in it and stuff, and it's just kind of, and so of course it's kind of funny seeing people provoked by it, but it's also, there I can see why some people do get provoked by it, because it does have, at least around the margin, some consequences. So I've been neutral and kind of just focused on other things.
Yeah, I think like similar. Like, I mean, I don't really care too much. It's just NFTs all over again, but this time on Bitcoin. So, I mean, happy for Casey. His ordinals thing took off. Like, even talking about that for like a year or two. And it's like, it always just seems like a weird idea. I was like, all right, go have fun, Casey. And now it's like the biggest project in Bitcoin, it feels like right now. So good for him in that regard. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't care about NFTs. I'm not going to buy or sell them. But my biggest fear is kind of like what you said, is like, if people like are like don't want to do op vault or something because of this, that'd be like a real downside. But I hope people can see like Taproot and op vault, or Taproot versus SegWit, are very different. Like, they're not complete overhauls of how transactions work.
The interesting on the dynamic is that, like, Taproot is so far from actual use still as well, because there's no integration, there's no use cases that are like obvious, right? At least not to the normal average use of Bitcoin. So like, it feels like you have this like new primitive, right, on Bitcoin that nobody uses it except the people, spray painting the cathedral. Like, it gives people a very bad taste. And I am curious to see, like, if this thing takes off a little bit, how Lightning open and closed channels transactions compete for the same lower economic density transactions as this stuff does. It'll be pretty ironic, but still interesting nonetheless. Okay, guys, there is some OpTech stuff I can mention if you guys want and are interested. Okay, so let's get some questions. Thoughts on the future of Keat, Hole Punch, potential Nostr Bitcoin integration? So Keith is interesting, has a bunch of trade-offs that are unresolved. Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. It leaks IPs still. To do that without it, you're going to need some coordinators and still unresolved. Well, Craig is coming to Nostr. Craig already responded to that. Constructive criticism for Nostr priorities as they seem. See, this is what happens when you ask questions on Nostr. Audience questions, they ask questions about Nostr. I'm trying to be careful to not make this show about Nostr, but it's hard to not mention it because it's so intertwined with Bitcoin. Freedom money, it's kind of like not as powerful if you don't have freedom communication. Because like in order for humans to trade, they need to talk to each other. So, and Bitcoin needs ways of coordination of like on the social layer. So that's why I got my teeth on Nostr and won't let go. Details on BIP 329 and how it works and practically how to use it. Did you cover this, Craig, or did you want to just...
Well, I'll just do it very briefly. Basically, any wallet that you have that has labels in it, you just go in Sparrow to File, Export Wallet, and you'll see a labels option there, which will allow you to export wallets. And I'm sure we'll see other wallets, add that sort of thing as well. And then you can just use File, Import Wallet, or whatever the other wallets use to kind of import stuff. I'm sure that'll be the kind of the sort of import export functions that use that. So it's really just a file format that you can then transfer that file around and bring it in wherever you want it.
Thanks. All right. So some of the shout outs, Bitcoin sticker bounties, No Good Radio, and Alby Buzz. Listen, guys, I mean, thank you so much for sticking around for 2 hours. We try to accomplish the goal show, which is bore everyone to death with the maximum amount of signal. I think this was successful in that way. I really appreciate everything you guys do for Bitcoin and the projects you guys work on. So any final thoughts, Craig?
Nothing really. Good to be here.
Thank you for coming. Ben?
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. It was fun. I don't know, fuck Craig Wright.
That's always a good thought. Lyn, thank you so much for coming and surviving our nerd out. Thank you so much for commenting on everything. Any final thoughts?
I think it's funny. If you look at the crypto criticism of Bitcoin, they're always like nothing's happened on Bitcoin, nothing's building on Bitcoin. And like literally this show went long because there's so much happening. And we're trying to like figure out how to organize and comment on all this stuff. Yeah, and it just kind of shows that there is a lot happening, and it's all about actually, for the most part, it's about how to make money better, how to make it more private, how to make it more secure, how to make it easier to use, how to make it faster, instead of just, for the most part, like building random shit on other things. So I'm very bullish on all the devs and all the people that are working on this. And I certainly learned a lot by, sitting here listening to some of the details at a finer level than I normally do. So I appreciate you having me on.
Well, thank you. That was one of the reasons why we started the show, is because, people are just saying, hey, nothing is happening in Bitcoin. And I'm like, hang on a second. I can't. And we cut out like a good third of this. It's absolutely endless. And we didn't even cover the op-tech stuff, which is everything that's happening in core. It's very bullish. It really is. So we have a lot of show notes with a lot of stuff that we didn't even get to. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you're new to the pod, make sure to listen to some very cool other episodes. Episode 15 about Lightning, episode 11 about podcasting 2.0 and value for value. And we also had a hardware wallet security panel on episode 5. Don't forget to follow at Bitcoin Review HQ or get in touch on Telegram, Bitcoin Review Pod, or bitcoinreview@coinkite.com. We don't have a crystal ball, so let us know about your projects. Leave your Boostagram on this episode and we'll try to read it on the next episode. We've added more people to the splits. Now if you send us streaming sats, some of that go to opensats.org. And also to Citadel Dispatch with my guest, Odell. If you don't know much about Value for Value or Bitcoin Podcast 2.0, go to bitcoin.review/V4V.